Hi everyone, Chris here with a vinyl video update. These are all New Zealand releases, new releases and recent finds from the crates, and they all feature on my radio show of the 18th of June 2016, so you can hear full cuts from these records on that show. I'll post the link to the podcast of it. First up, Civil Union, Seasick, Love Drunk. So this is the first vinyl release from label Melted Ice Cream, who up to now have been putting out cassettes. This is a post-punk release. It's got all those familiar tropes of kind of angular guitars and angsty lyrics and multiple kind of tempo changes and so on. I really like it. It just kind of hits the right spot for me. Civil Union. Not sure what part of the country they come from actually, but they've been around for a little while, but first vinyl release, and as I say, first vinyl release for the label. And that's what's playing in the background actually. Next up, Joe Blossom, All of the Above. This is the second album from Joe Blossom. His first, Nocturnes, I was a real fan of. I think it was only released in a pressing of 100. This has got wider distribution, and I think it's a real lift as well in his songwriting and in his craft. It's sophisticated pop, so people who are fans of acts like Lawrence Arabia or SJD, I think will really dig this. It kind of sits in a similar vein. He's got a really nice voice, and as I say, these kind of sophisticated pop songs. There's two different pressings of this. It's out on black vinyl, but it's also been pressed on gold. I'm not sure of the numbers of each pressing, but I believe that the gold is a more limited release. And I think the first was, this is out on Cabbage Tree Records, which I think might be his own label or someone associated with him. The same label has put out the first album, Nocturnes, which is also worth tracking down, but this is probably the place to start. A couple of recent finds from the crates that are featured on the show as well. So first up, Dreams Are Falling from Sandra Bell. So this has got a bit of a story to it. On Record Store Day, I was at Southbound Records watching a live performance from Delaney Davidson and Tammy Nielsen. And at the end of that set, I turned around and Sandra Bell was sat next to me. And so I got talking to her, and I asked her whether she had any copies of this record, because I've been looking for it for a while. It doesn't come up in stores in New Zealand very often. There's copies overseas, but the postage is big. And she said that she did have a couple of copies left. And so I said, well, look, we exchanged email addresses, and she agreed that she'd sell me one. And it turned out she lives just around the corner from where I work, so it was a pretty easy walk down one afternoon to pick one up, to get a signed copy of this. This is the original pressing. I've actually since heard that it is going to be repressed on videotape records out of the US. Something that when I talked to her about this, she wasn't sure whether that was going to go ahead. She'd kind of given up on it happening. She has heard now that it's confirmed, so it should be out later this year. So this was out in Turbulence Records, 1992. Some of the tracks were also collected together on some of the Expressway compilations. So she's very much in that Dunedin Expressway kind of scene. So you've got the songs. Her first EP is kind of almost a bit kind of indie folk, but here kind of there's much more kind of electric guitar. So you've got people like Peter Jeffries, Alistair Galbraith, David Mitchell, Peter Gutteridge, all performing on this as well. Another oldie that I featured on the 18th of June show was this, the third album from the Terminals. The second, so what was the first one? Disconnected, I believe. Then there was a cassette album, Touch, the third, from 1991. It was out on Rathmond Records, and I managed to find this in a store for not a bad price actually. It often goes for quite a bit of money. And it's got the inner sleeve right up here on the Terminals. And so this features, what did I play from this? I played Mr. Clean. So Stephen Kogel is vocalist on here. Brian Crook, who went on to the Renderers. Stephen Kogel, he put out a record a couple of years ago, Dark Matter, that I highly recommend. Really worth picking up. Peter Stapleton on here on drums, so nice to have that. I did a little set of Wellington hardcore punk. There's a thriving hardcore punk scene in Wellington, and they're releasing a lot of their stuff on vinyl through the label Always Never Fun Records. This is a split EP from Rogernomics and Bone Cruncher. So this is kind of thrashy hardcore punk. I was a real fan of bands in the New Zealand hardcore scene in the mid to late 80s. Bands like Nazgul, Compos Mentis, Mindfuckers and so on. And I find that these Wellington bands, well, some of them sit in that vein. Rogernomics in particular remind me a bit of Nazgul. So you've got a female vocalist on both these bands. Bone Cruncher as well. Bone Cruncher put out their own EP last year on Always Never Mind. And then also on the same label, this is Vomit Storm. Mudge or Be Mudged. So this is really kind of ferocious thrashing. This is a 45 RPM EP, and you can see what there's 13 tracks on there, so it's kind of really fast and thrashy and furious. And these both, you know, a lot of the new hardcore now I suppose is edging towards metal and has that kind of real growly dark metal vocal, and this, I mean, this is pretty ferocious stuff, but it's not quite that, and yeah, I like it. And finally, I just want to show you this 7-inch, which also features on the show, and this is the new 7-inch from Tiny Ruins. It's called Dreamwave, and this was recorded with David Lynch, the acclaimed film director, producer. So she's been working with some amazing people. She's been working with Robert Scott, Hamish Kilgour, both of The Clean, and then this single that she's recorded with David Lynch. So David Lynch's job on here was as producer, and yeah, and it was recorded, I think it was recorded by him in Los Angeles way back in 2014. So you've got the vocal cut and the instrumental cut on the B side. And I think Tiny Ruins is just going from strength to strength. She's been touring with more mainstream artists like Beck Runger as well, and I think she could easily kind of make it in that mainstream sense, you know, a young singer-songwriter, but she seems to have this connection with these established independent voices, and she's doing great things, so it's a really nice 7-inch to pick up. As I say, all recent New Zealand vinyl or recent finds from the crates that featured on my 18th of June radio show. I'll put the link up so you can have a listen to the show, and once again, thanks for watching.